I'm back to my same old ways. I swear I try to change. You just feel so right when I do wrong. So right along.
So we've got Donald Malloy, the Green Beret, and we've got Nathaniel Ellison, the clinician, and I'm Jason Lemire, the playwright. And gentlemen, I've got a question for you.
He's excited about this one.
I am. I know. I've been waiting for this one. So, can you share a time?
Oh boy.
That you personally,
yes, I can,
felt dumb.
100%.
Like real dumb.
Just one?
I'll start off. Ready?
Yes.
3rd grade. And my teacher kept on telling me, Donald, sound it out. And I remember thinking, I know it's an L, but I really feel like it's a 7. And I know there's an E in there, but it really feels like it's a 3, and I can't sound out those numbers. And so I'm looking at this word that I can kind of roughly recognize that it looks like something I know, but there's no sounding out what I am seeing. And she was like, just sound it out. And I'm like getting nervous because I was like, okay, look, I know I'm not smart and I get that and I know what this word is, but I can't do it. Whatever you're asking me to do does not compute. So while you continue to tell me, sound it out, and I continue to be silent, I just call me dumb and move on.
Behavioral psychology class in graduate school. There's this assignment, and it's the only one, right? It's the paper at the end of the term. Outside the procrastination piece, which I obviously put it off until the very last second, I turned in the paper. I thought it was pretty good. I get it back from the professor, and he's like, you failed to convey really any points in this paper that would make it possible for me to give you a passing grade. However, you seem to understand what it is that you're talking about when you speak in class. I was like, not again. So that was mine. And for me, it was the segue to that. The next piece of that is, well, what can I do to pass your class? Right? Because then I immediately go into like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this class because I didn't do very well on this very random paper for behavioral psychology. He's like, how about we just go for a walk and you just explain it to me.
Oh, that's a good teacher.
Right? For like the next 4 weeks. And I'm thinking, I knew that there was a reason that I liked you. You're a great professor. Really enjoyed him quite a bit, but that was
that was your I feel dumb moment.
Well, not only the I feel dumb moment as much as it was like, not again.
Yeah.
See, and for that I can't begin to tell you how many dumb moments I had. I mean, we're talking about I'm an officer in the Army, and I'm going to something called the Captain's Career Course. And Tiffany, you've probably read this piece, writing this book, and I'm writing it out. I'm like, wow, I feel incredibly dumb even writing this. But I had this plan I was supposed to give to these people to evaluate, and they're like, this is like crayons, right? Like,
totally.
What are you doing here? And I remember having this distinct feeling of like, I need to run out of this room, right? And there's like 2 or 3 majors in front of me, a couple light bird colonels, and I'm standing there with this loose plan and thinking to myself, like, I can't fake it anymore. They caught me.
Oh yeah, the imposter piece for sure.
I'm an idiot.
Absolutely.
They busted me.
Yeah.
I got this far, but
now they discovered it.
And it wasn't the first time.
Right.
So what's funny is like I have academic ones for sure, but the one that I immediately thought of was, my father's a general contractor and gets me basically, his son, first one to go to a private college, first one in the family, the whole thing. And I end up majoring in theater and Italian. So out of the gate, everybody's like, oh, let's see how this goes. and he pulls some strings. It's a union shop, but he basically gets me my union book so that I can work on his sites, right? While I'm sort of like figuring my shit out. And one of my first jobs was just like driving a box truck. So I'd like drop off supplies at a site, and then I would go around and I would like do light demo and clean up and load everything up and take them to like off-site trash dump. So it's my first time. I'd driven a little bit in previous summers I'd worked for him, but this is my first time like driving this big box truck. And I pull into the loading dock at the Willowbrook Mall because they're doing some work at Macy's, and I got to park this fucking truck. And there's this guy, he goes, so you're going to park, you're going to look for this guy, Eddie Pensack. And so I'm like trying to park the truck. And it is just bad. I'm like hitting everything. And I can just see this guy, Eddie Pensack, just like staring at me, just like, you idiot. And I finally just that freaking truck into the spot. And I get out and I go, hi, you're Eddie Pensack? He goes, yeah, boy, who are you? I go, I'm Jason Lemire. And he goes, oh, you're the one who had to jump out of Frankie's penis to get a job.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm the dummy. And I think that what's interesting about, like, so our theme this week, so welcome everybody, episode 3 of Harder Than Healing. This one is called Whiskey Tangro Oxfot. It's our dyslexia episode.
Yeah, you got to take a while after that one.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, let it sit. Let
that marinade.
Yeah.
Is you know, as an educator, definitely worked with kids with dyslexia. We've got dyslexia in my immediate family. And Nathaniel, we've talked so much about that feeling of those particularly young people.
Yeah.
So if you could talk, so in terms of the themes being dyslexia, I want to start off with, what isn't dyslexia?
What isn't dyslexia?
What? Yeah.
I think the most common, and Angela, you can hop in on this one too, is like you switch your numbers and your letters around. Like you just turn everything backwards. Like you just transpose stuff.
That isn't dyslexia.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the common understanding, is that you can't read the words because you're flipping around the letters. It's like they're magically moving in your head. It's like a slideshow or something as far as the way that your brain processes information. So that's not dyslexia.
So what is dyslexia?
I'm going to hold on that one. I'm going to let Angela do that.
Okay. All right. So we have an
Because I'm
amazing.
asking the same things.
Right. I mean, because I can give you my version of it, but
Okay.
she's going to give you the version.
All right. So we should say right now, our guest today is a dear friend of mine and Nathaniel's, and soon to be dear friend of yours, Donald, Angela Moriera. Just an amazing educator, human being, just parent, friend, all the things.
Yes.
She's the best.
All the things.
But while we're talking shop, the three of us, because she's going to be joining us in a few minutes, Malloy, you've talked about your son referring to ADHD as a superpower.
Love it. I love it because that's where my mind was. So we have talked about what it is to have a different kind of brain, style of thinking. And I used to tell him that there were times that I'm in a classroom, I don't know the content, I'm struggling to read it and comprehend it, or at least read it and comprehend in a way that I can work with the material. And so what do you think I did? I found workarounds. And so I would either have to, and I'll use the word manipulate, but it was never intended to be manipulative.
Okay.
Right? It was like, okay, I have to find a way to communicate to this woman, this man, this professor, this whatever. I'm not an idiot, but I don't get it in this sense. And so how do I manipulate my environment so I can get to a place where I can communicate that I know the information? I'm just not seeing it. I'm not understanding it in the way that they want me to. And I struggled really bad with math because, as you explain what dyslexia is not, I can't do algebra because my numbers move around. And so I can't trust myself to do algebra. Do I know what 2 + 2 is? Absolutely. But if you're looking on a piece of paper and those numbers are changing while you're kind of like processing things, it's like, I don't know if this was 2 + 2 or if this is 2 + 8. And the next thing you know, you're doing like everything you can to check all your work for a certain period of time. And then you're at the bottom of it and you're like, time's up.
Right.
And so for my son, I don't want him to go through that. Right. And so I tell him, pretty consistently, advocate for yourself. Right. Talk to your teacher, talk to whomever it is that's providing you care at that point, and just say like, hey, I don't know what this is. And if they don't get that, then you have to start to find ways to manipulate your environment so that you can still convey what you need to convey. You can still communicate when you need to communicate. And that's become our superpower. And I hate to say it because it becomes manipulative, but it can also be seen as charisma, problem solving, all kinds of different things. I mean, I can find all kinds of incredible ways to stall on an answer until I come up with it.
Right.
And that for him and I, we're like, oh, that's our specialty, right? We can do that. I think that's the huge piece for us.
The stalling piece is takes us back to a couple episodes ago when, like, you want to start first? I was like, sure. So there's this combination of lack of impulse control. So my ADHD brain is like, I'll do it. And then as I start the process, I'm like, wait, what was the question again?
Yeah.
And then after I get done trying to catch up with myself, and then you answered the question, I was like, oh, yeah, I probably should have processed that before I answered.
All right, so how about this? How about what is Nathaniel's dyslexia? So forget about like a sort of global definition. What is dyslexia for you?
For me, and I've never been formally diagnosed with dyslexia. Having said that, my son has it. It's genetic. My dad has it. The likelihood that I have it is relatively high. For me, it's I read at a snail's pace. And it's because I have to go back and process the information so many times. So I didn't know it when I was in, undergraduate or graduate school, but the example that sticks in my head, and I think I've told you guys this story, is the piece where I'm reading a magazine with folks. And I don't know if we did this. This was off air, I think, when we talked about it initially. I was reading a magazine and with my partner at the time, and I was, it's got the big picture on the top, takes up the top half of the page, and then there's the 2 columns underneath it, and then there's 2 columns on the other page. I'm just finishing the bottom of the first column on the first page, and my partner turns the page and was like, okay. I was like, oh, shit. Like, you just finished reading all of that information, and I was like, oh, you're not done yet? I was like, nope. So she flips it back, and I'm like, okay, we're doing cliff notes on this one. Like, we're doing first sentence, last sentence, and we're going to get the content that we need so that when she turns the page, I can do that again. And then when we have the conversation about this article that I've theoretically read, I'll at least have enough to be able to fill in the blanks. So,
and then when you're working with students, because in your capacity, DU,
yeah,
you have students who have dyslexia, and in your capacity, you're helping them navigate that college experience.
Correct.
What's that like?
It's wonderful. I mean, it's really entertaining is probably not the right word. It's fantastic to be able to work with students when they're in that space of, one, really knowing what it is that they need to work on. And developmentally, we talk about executive functioning all the time, right? Like, it's become kind of a thing. However, the reality of it is, like, your executive functioning is coming online when you're going to college. So all of these things that people have been telling you to do for years around be more organized, or make sure you plan this out, or you should use a calendar, like all of those things that you've heard.
And those are all executive function things, to be clear.
Correct.
That's like the sort of the planning part of the brain. Yeah.
So all of that starts to come online when you're at university age. So I have these students who are like, I've always wanted to be organized. I mean, it's like my experience of, like, people give you the calendar and they're like, here, go be organized. And I'm like, yes, theoretically, that sounds like a wonderful idea. However, you just gave me 365 blank pieces of paper. Like,
How do I do that?
that is not helpful at all. So it's really, I really enjoy the work that I do with university students. And largely because there is that piece of them being able to access what it is that they've been told that they were supposed to be able to do for the entirety of their younger lives.
So what I hear you saying is that there's a portion of managing or thriving with dyslexia that involves executive function skills that you don't necessarily even have access to at a younger age.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
And
seems kind of cruel.
well, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I think the other irony of it is, though, that we do learn the workaround. I mean, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia, and I call it whatever your version of happy is, right? Whether it's dysgraphia, dyslexia, just whatever. We do learn the workaround. And I think one of the things that's super important to me is to help students or folks get to that place where they understand that what you do as far as your skill set is concerned, whether it's walking into a room and reading the room and finding out, like, who's the person that takes the best notes, or you walk into the classroom and you know that we're going to be talking about photosynthesis, even though nobody's told you about it, because you're like checking all this stuff. You're like, I need to figure out what's going on so that when, teacher X calls on me and says, hey, Nathaniel, can you contribute a little bit to the class? I at least will be able to say, well, I had a question about whatever, even though I'm not tracking at all. So I think that the workaround is hugely important.
It's funny, while you say that, I'm thinking, like, you're reading my mind. That's it. It's like how you, I hate to say it, but that's how you hide, right? Like you learn so many things, the workarounds, the different pieces. I mean, I have been called an incredibly observant person. And I felt like said, yeah, well, because you got to pay attention to a lot of things if you know the one thing that you need to do is hide as soon as somebody starts asking you questions.
And I think the irony of it is that it's us as students, like in that student space, learning how to, and I describe it like it's me learning how to get the teacher to stop bothering me, right? So it's I'm going to do.
Oh, music to every teacher's ears. That's really how we educators want you guys thinking of us, is we're the one.
Well, and I don't think that it's an active process, right? Like when I'm in the 5th grade, I'm not thinking to myself, if I give this person an appropriate enough answer, they will stop bothering me. However, experientially, that's what ends up happening. Because, if you're that kid, this is me raising my hand as that kid, who's sitting in the classroom and didn't hear the teacher say, take out your books and turn to page 642. Which is kind of high for, I guess, a book. You guys are out here reading War and Peace. I know, right? I'm like, that might turn to page 62.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I noticed the entire class is like grabbing their books and turning to whatever page, right? The workaround is, hey, Billy, what page did she say? I have no idea.
Here's what's really interesting is that I was just reading this article about how hiring managers in corporate America are having this problem because they feel like so many of their new hires are lacking basic social skills and basic observational skills. So it's funny, like what you guys are describing is like hiding or workarounds or manipulations. Also sounds like the cultivation of skill sets that are incredibly important, particularly like with the robots coming for everybody else's jobs, like the ability to freaking notice people and read a room and figure out how to survive and thrive in an area that isn't necessarily immediately comfortable for you. That sounds like a superpower.
Well, it is for sure. And I think part of what it is that I really enjoy in the work that I do clinically is you'll get this report. So you go and you get your testing done. You get the psychoeducational report back.
Yep.
I mean, Angela will probably talk about this a little bit. You get this breakdown of all these numbers that say your fluid reasoning is 120, like you're superior in this, and you're superior in this, and you're superior in this. Then you get the processing speed, and it's like average. And average is exactly what it's average, right? But you're superior in everything else, right? So that's the student who's like, I understand all of these things that you're telling me and all of this information. This is you in middle school, where you know the information. You just can't get it out of your head and onto the piece of paper.
And that's so frustrating.
So frustrating.
All right, so with thinking about frustration, I think now's a great time to bring Angela in, because her superpower is taking, and I saw her do this for years, taking middle school. So already, if you're in middle school, you're frustrated. You just wake up frustrated, you go to sleep frustrated because you're in middle school. But then when you have dyslexia, it's that idea of there is this disconnect between what I know I can do and what's coming out of my face or what's happening in my brain. And I've just seen Angela so artfully and with so much kindness help kids navigate that. So I feel like that would be a great time to bring her in, and we can keep the conversation going from there.
Sounds perfect.
All right, so we're going to be back in just a minute, and when that happens, Angela's going to be sitting in the big chair.
All right.
All right.
She gets the hot seat.
All Points North is the official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. APN offers custom mental health, trauma, and addiction treatment programs at APN Lodge in Colorado. Visit apn.com to learn more.
All right, we are back for episode 3 of Harder Than Healing. Our episode, of course, whiskey, Tangro Oxfot, and sitting in the supple leather chair is my friend and soon to be your friend, Angela Moriera. Welcome, Angela. Let's start with, I think, everybody's favorite question. Can you remember a time that you felt dumb?
Oh, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And let me just say, both of your stories resonated with me. And Malloy, when you were telling yours, I was trying not to cry or get choked up because I thought, oh, they're going to hear me over here in the corner. I've got to be quiet. But really resonated. So I think for me, I had so many times. I mean, I just humiliated, right? But I think the time that I was most embarrassed as an adult, most recently, was at a school that I worked with, pretty traditional setting. So a lot of the faculty that work there, I felt like it was that imposter syndrome, right? Where I was like, I don't belong here, so I got to do all these things to make sure that I can stay here and I can prove myself. And I had to stand up and write on the board, and I spelled scissors wrong.
Oh, yeah.
In a second grade classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was humiliating. And then it was just like, now everybody knows. They all know that I'm stupid.
Right.
You know, even though I had worked there for 6-7 years and done a really great job.
Yeah, and helped like countless kids and like helped adults and like. So can you tell us a little bit about what your relationship is with dyslexia? I feel like we got a little window into it just there, but sort of like personally, professionally, as a parent, all the things.
Yeah, so it's quite a journey, right? Because I had the experience as a kid. And then, you know, in college, I went through school and went all the way to get my master's, and I had no idea that I was dyslexic. I still look back and I'm like, I don't know how I did that.
Right.
And yeah, school was hard. I found other ways, like I was athletic and personable. And so like same kind of thing with your professor who, wow, it was amazing to walk with you so that you could tell. But it was that thing where I'd have all these connections with teachers and they saw me as this charismatic, smart person. And then I'd have to like turn in a paper. And I just cringed thinking about what they thought of my papers back then. And so then when I got to college though, I loved what I was studying, so I was wanting to spend the extra time, right? Because I always feel like whatever time it takes a neurotypical person to read, it takes me twice as long.
For sure.
But I was willing to do that because I was so fascinated by, like, I wanted to become an educator, and I was really excited about it. But interestingly enough, I just have to add that went through my 4 years of college and undergrad, came out with a degree in education without knowing how to teach kids to read. And that's something that's not just unique to me, but that's like nationwide. We're figuring it out. There's more brain science. But then, so after college, went and became a teacher, and I was just in a regular classroom. I'll never forget, I was teaching second grade, and there was I guess the lesson that I had to do was this short E sound. I didn't know the short E sound. And like, that is another humiliating moment where I was like, oh, I don't know. What does a short E say? You know? And so if you think about me being in my early 20s and I'm supposed to be teaching second graders, and I think about all that I had to teach myself just to get to that point, right? And so that's another thing I think dyslexics have to do is like, you have to like backfill all of this information. And Google, it's like life-changing. But then after teaching in a regular classroom for several years, I went on to become a learning specialist. And during that training, I went through something called Orton-Gillingham, which if anybody is familiar with dyslexia, you've probably heard about it, but it is a way to teach kids with dyslexia, or adults, all the way through adults, how to read in a very systematic, multi-sensored approach. And it works. It works. So when I was going through it, I was like, oh my gosh, where has this been my whole life? The English language makes sense. Like, thank you. And so then being able to give this gift to other kids. Throughout that entire process and working as a learning specialist for 9 years, or maybe it was only 6, I didn't think I had dyslexia. I had no idea. And I really want to get this point across. I had worked with 3rd through 5th graders for that time. And my kids were brilliant, right? Like what they could do in the classroom and in my room, and the survival that it took to be in a regular classroom, right?
And not only a regular classroom, but we're talking about a regular classroom at a school that's got a very challenging academic curriculum.
Yes. And you're when you're by 3rd grade, you're aware of your peers and you see your discrepancies and you just know. And so then they would come into my space, and I just wanted to create a space where they felt like they were safe and could be vulnerable. And even still, when they came to me, I was helping them to read. I was giving them that extra attention. So I'm asking them to do something that's hard for them after already being in a classroom where it's hard. And so, I mean, they would like take my pencil sharpener apart and put it back together just to see how it worked. Or, you know, the art that they would do, or they would bring in videos of their ski jumps and like all these fascinating things. I'm like, these kids are brilliant. They're so amazing. I love you all. This is my, you know, my people, right? So then when I was 36, I had gone to our headmaster and just said, you know, I am asking parents and kids to go and get tested. I've never been tested, and I feel like it would be really good for me to go through the process just to be able to talk about it with my kids, with my students.
Did you guys how slick that was? That was really slick. You know, just so I could understand my job.
But I honestly did not go into it thinking I was going to get a diagnosis.
Really?
No.
So really? Okay.
No, Jason, I did not think I'm dyslexic. And here is the reason why I want you to know this. I didn't think I was smart enough to be dyslexic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because I had watched these kids for so long, and over years of trauma and shame of being dyslexic, and just you're telling yourself all the time how stupid you are, right? You can't spell scissors. You have to be stupid, right? So I was really going into it for that reason. And when the evaluator sat me down and she was like, do you know that you have dyslexia and ADHD? And I thought I was going to fall off the couch. I was like, what? I had no idea. And so then what comes with that process, and I don't know like in other diagnoses for other people, but there is a process in that, because initially there's the shock. And then I was angry because I was like, I am 36 years old.
For sure.
How did my teachers, my parents, all of these people fail me? I had no idea. So I was really, you know, I went through this period of you know, but I was angry. And then it was grief, right? And this idea of like, I think about in our world, what we have lost because of kids who are not diagnosed, or because kids do not have teachers who know how to teach reading, how to read. And I do not put that on teachers, because it's institutions that are not teaching teachers to read too, or teachers to teach reading. But that grief, and then ultimately the beauty of it, and this is why if you are a parent or if you are somebody that just wants to know, ultimately it's empowering. because now I can get up in front of my peers and there's, ask me to spell something on the whiteboard. And I'm like, well, you asked the dyslexic, so you might have to help me with spelling, and I own it. And I'm vulnerable in that, but it is empowering to know. And also you talked about those scores. I mean, it wasn't my highest score was my processing speed, but I looked at these scores and I was like, holy shit, I'm actually smart.
Right.
Like I had no idea,
right.
And so to get that and feel empowered in that too.
All right. So check this out. So one of the things that I'm really intrigued by is what's sort of emerging, at least in my head, as what I've been calling the dyslexia mindset. And I think about all the solutions you were able to have and the way that you see your students creating solutions. And then I think about whether or not the three of you think the dyslexic mindset is a thing, and then tying it back to your service, Malloy, I'm curious if dyslexic mindset is a thing, if it was something you saw applied in the field.
Well, for me, it was like, it's very simple. This is kind of going back to some of the other stories I was telling. You're always looking for a way around stuff, right? You're always looking potentially to fit in. And it's funny because, while you were talking, I was thinking like, not misspelling scissors, I couldn't spell my middle name. And for me, all the way through like middle school, I remember thinking like, these teachers are silly if they think I'm going to try and spell that sucker, right? And
restaurant? Nah.
I got towards, I think it was like my first year, I'm vaguely remembering the event, and I had to go and sign up for class. I want to say it was my sophomore year of high school. And I remember this line that was like first, middle, and last. And I was like, let's go for it. And I wrote it down. Who knows if I spelt it right or not, but nobody told me I didn't, right?
Lord,
and
what's your middle name?
Arthur. Middle name's Arthur. And so for me, that was like, oh, nope, we're not trying that one. Arthur, there's a th in there, and how do you do that? And so going back to your question, I don't know if I want to call it a superhero or a superpower or not, but for me, everything I've done in life has been kinetic. Right? You don't want to put me near a whiteboard. And I'm the same way now. Like I write stuff on a board all the time, and everybody in that room knows that if I misspell it, I don't care. Right? And it took me a long, long time to get there. But at this point now, like I recognize why I went from a college baseball coach, high school baseball coach, a police officer, right? I mean, you name it. If it was kinetic, I was doing it. And the next thing you know, infantry, special forces, it was like until they put me behind a computer, and I was like, nope, tapping out. I was, and this is going to be for the audience who listens, I was in the military. I'm in Afghanistan, and there's a briefing that I have to give. And because this briefing to me meant that I had to either spell things or explain things in a way that I knew I couldn't hide. So I went on mission. And somebody was like, so you would rather go into this 24, 48, 72 hour op, you would rather do that than go in and give this presentation? Oh, you bet your ass I would.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. I'm going to go and get in the team room, throw on my gear, hang out with my boys. We're going to go and fly into battle. Absolutely. To me, that sounds amazing. Way better than getting up in front of whatever brass is going to be sitting at that table.
Well, but hang on, because check this out. Angela just said, what a loss, right? That grieving of like, man, everything we lose out on as a society when we don't organize things for folks to succeed. And while I'm sure it was like, obviously it was great for you, and I'm sure there were benefits to, your crew and our country, you going out, spending 48 hours getting shot at, we collectively lost out on that presentation.
Yeah, and I mean, that there's a lot of truth to that for sure, right? Because I kind of avoided grad school, even though I knew what I wanted to do, because I was paralyzed by wanting to go and do any further education. Mm-hmm. But, when you said that you got the diagnosis, when I got it, I was just like, oh, thank God.
Wow. I was on Angela's side.
Really?
Yeah, because I was in graduate school when I got the ADHD diagnosis. And
Can I ask you what prompted you to go get tested?
I didn't.
So was it a teacher that was like, you need
no.
to? Or? Oh.
No.
I was wondering the same thing. Was it an abduction?
I want to answer mine after you answer yours.
It was the opposite of the abduction.
Okay.
I was getting dropped off to class.
Yeah.
And my former partner looks over at me and says the exact same thing. You know you have ADHD, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, that can't be possible because I'm in graduate school. Mm-hmm. Right? Like,
oh, that's interesting.
You can't have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which in and of itself sounds like, oh no, and be in graduate school. So that was the first thing. And then I had that experience of like the recognition and then the overwhelmed and then if I'd have known this in the third grade, like that shit would have been dope.
Yeah.
Like y'all could have saved me a bunch of grief. And at the same time, I think there's also the reality of, because we've learned how to function, and you'll appreciate this too, as a person who got diagnosed later, it wasn't something that was wrong with me as much as it was just the way that I was. And then once I had that diagnostic piece, it was like, oh, like all of that stuff makes a ton of sense now. Like that's why I can't pay a parking ticket on time.
But so for me, I think there's, and I don't know, maybe I'm just the silver lining guy because that's what I like to do. But for me, I go back and I'm thinking, so I get tested in college. I'm revealing more than I probably should to the former school, but they gave me this paperwork. And so I took out this paperwork and I'm supposed to do testing to understand my own field that I'm going into. And so I do the testing on several people. And all of a sudden I'm running out of time and I have these 2 tests that I need to do. So what do? I give it to myself. And so I do the testing myself. I turn in all the paperwork. Again, the workaround, right?
Yeah.
And so then my supervisor gives me these numbers back and says like, yeah, here you go. Okay, good job, whatever else. But you need to get a hold of, number this and number that. And I was like, okay, what for? Well, this person has, depression, and this person is dyslexic and has ADHD. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I take the paperwork back and I go down and look it up. It's me. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Wow. I'm not going to lie. I was in a fog for like the next week. And I was like, what does that mean? But for me too, when you say like, oh, I wished I would have known when I was a kid, I am so happy I knew nothing. All of those workarounds, all of those inventive ideas, whether we call it a superpower or not, that became my charisma. And I'm an introverted introvert. I don't like to be around people most of the time. But I found that because I had to do that workaround, I have a fair amount of maybe social skills and a half a dozen other things that I probably wouldn't have if I didn't have to struggle so much with all of this other stuff.
And just to clarify, like it's not that I wish I had known. It's if I had known, that would have been really useful.
Can I also ask, would you say that to a parent too? Because I do have parents, and I understand it, who don't want to have their kids tested, or they don't want the kid, they might have them tested, they get a diagnosis, and they don't want them to know that. So would you say, like, how do you feel like about it? I think sometimes I'm like, I would never change my brain.
Right.
My life, it's great. This is who I am, right? But then I have kids, and I definitely am like, I know that they're both dyslexic, and we've started the early intervention because I don't want them to have that same struggle.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and so Nathaniel has, the ADHD Summit, and I've been presenting at it for several years. And we started off presenting with this PowerPoint. And I decided I wanted to ask these people, because we had Q&A at the end of it, and the Q&A was very straightforward. It was like, okay, tell me what you want to know. Almost every single time I was like, tell me a success story. I want to know that there's hope for my youngin. I want to know that they can still conquer life.
Yes.
And those kinds of things. And each time I'm thinking like, okay, well, I consider myself successful.
Yes, absolutely.
And I consider everybody that I have ever worked with in Special Forces. If anybody's listening to this podcast, that's from Special Forces. That is, I hope there's tons of people listening to the podcast. But if anybody from Special Forces can hear me, like that is an absolutely elite level of human being. Like, I still can't fathom that I was even there. But these human beings, a lot of them have ADHD and dyslexia. And they know how to do the workaround, right? These are polished human beings that have such an exceptional ability to create that workaround and find that space to work and appreciate the world, minus the silly little thing that is different about us, right? And be able to communicate it in a way that, for me, makes them my people. And I don't even know if I answered what I wanted to answer because I went all emotional there, so my bad.
No, come on, big brother. So Angela, one of the things that I know that you do with other educators at the school you work at, you put them through these simulations. What do you call it? We
call it the dyslexia simulation, and sometimes we'll make it a neurodiverse simulation so that we kind of we can do like somebody who is gifted or has ADHD. So
can you describe that for our listeners a little bit? Well, here, start with that, and then I like whatever my brain is doing, I have my follow up. Like, all right, so all right, go ahead.
It's one of my favorite things to do. I think because I have dyslexia and I was on the receiving end of a lot of, or felt like that a lot as a kid, to be running some of the simulations so that I just get to let other people know how it feels. But essentially there are 7 stations. And if you ever have an opportunity to do this, I highly recommend it. I think it builds a lot of empathy and knowledge. But an IDA is an International Dyslexia Association. Will run it, so you could find that anywhere that you're located. And there's 7 stations, and it just simulates what it's like to have dyslexia. So there's like a spelling portion of it. There's a reading, and the text is hard to decode for a neurotypical person. Just there's the phonological piece. I think you all were talking about earlier, like what is dyslexia? And so it's that piece, and they're doing a lot of research on the brain, and they're always finding out more things. But so essentially the way I describe it for myself is I don't hear the sounds clearly like a neurotypical person would. So in a word, like when I was little, if it was, bat, I can't isolate the sounds b, a, and t, right? Or I can't match that sound to its letter corresponding to that, to the B and the B, right? So my brain has a really difficult time deciphering those letters, putting them together. That then makes spelling hard, decoding hard. Yeah. And then you talk about needing the repetition for a dyslexic. And I yes, absolutely, dyslexics need a lot of repetition. But I think about if you're a neurotypical person and you're hearing language all the time that you're able to decipher easily and you can hear those sounds, you're getting that practice all the time. Right. Whereas a dyslexic, okay, it's like, oh, now I hear, the short E says eh. Well, I have to do that 25, 30 times before that sticks. And so that's why it takes, I think, a lot longer. But
I think the piece also of when you talk about the dyslexic brain or the dyslexic workaround, one of the things that I think is super important is we're all just ridiculously stubborn. I mean, I don't think I've ever met, and I'm obviously, like, I work with college students and I have, my practice, and one of my students just graduated with her master's degree, and the story, I mean, she was an amazing student, and at the same time had all of those skill sets to be able to say, like, oh, such and such professor was just like, you need to redo this because of X, Y, and G, and she was like, I'm not doing that. Like, she would come into my space and she would be like, can you believe this thing? And then the next thing would be like, hey, look how I spelled whatever word. And it was like phonetically spelled, and it was like 20 letters long. But she knew what she needed to do to be successful. And I think it's not so much the dyslexic brain. It may be, I think, more experientially. Like, we just know we're going to have to work harder to get this done.
So here's something that I wonder, and like thinking about, and I got a soft spot for your girls because I know them and they're wonderful.
They love you.
I think this is something that I'm wondering. I'm not sure, but I think that if you're a parent or you're an educator and you're doing early intervention with a kid, which is to say you're getting them accurately diagnosed, and you're starting them, whether it's Orton Gillingham or, you're starting them on a process. Right. Knowing the people that I know, even those kiddos who have had the benefit of earlier intervention, I don't think you're taking away the struggle.
Oh no, I don't think so at all.
It seems to me what you're taking away is the shame and the stigma, and hopefully if you're in an environment with hip educators and hip adults, like it will give them the window into the struggle. But it doesn't strike me as the struggle is gone. Is that accurate?
I would agree with that. So I think what you can do is that early intervention. So then a kid, if you are getting that in like kindergarten, first grade, by the time they're in third grade, they might be reading at grade level or above grade level, right? Mm-hmm. And so then you essentially have remediated them to be at a level that's proficient, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean that when they get to high school or they get to college that they're not going to encounter, more struggle.
Well, and I think one of the things that's important, especially when we talk about the educational piece of it, is shout out to Vertical Skills Academy, which is where my kid goes to school. My youngest.
Shout out to Vincent.
Shout out to Vincent, who hopefully he'll be hanging out with us at some point. And he is at that point now where he's at grade level, right? And it's because of that intervention. And so the struggle will still be there as far as him having to work. However, developmentally, it goes back to the piece we were talking about before with executive functioning. If you have that early intervention and you're taught in that OG Orton Gillingham way, it provides the pathways that you need in order to be able to read those more complicated things, to be able to sound out those words.
Can I also add to that, like as if you picture a third grader, right, who has not been diagnosed and they're reading under grade level, the confidence I would have kids come to my class who just like their confidence was shot at third grade, because if you are a kid who does well reading and you're reading here, right? And even if have dyslexia and you're just staying where you are and you're not growing, I mean, the discrepancy just gets bigger and bigger and you get further and further behind. And then fourth grade is harder. So you have homework now and you have all these other things, but you have to make up all of this that you've lost. And so it's the gift of time too, of like keeping up. So
there's also and I've heard this story thousands of times, the kid who gets up because you know that you're going to be reading that fourth paragraph.
Yes, you counted.
Right? And we've talked about this before too, right? Where you read the content in the fourth paragraph while everybody else is reading their information. So you don't get any of that. And then it gets to you and it's just like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to vomit. Right?
Yeah. Like, it's like, I still remember there was like, I think it was like fourth grade or something. They're like, all right, Malloy, you're up. And I read this paragraph. And then right after that, I was like, nailed it. And my teacher's like, okay, so what does that mean to you? And I was like, oh my God, you were expecting me to hear that as well as read
comprehend what I read? What?
No, like,
just had to get through it.
Give me a little while. I want to go ahead and read that sucker about 3 or 4 more times, and then I'll go ahead and respond. And it's like, and you can't do that, right? So it's just like, I don't remember how I got out of that one, but so
I'm imagining you getting out of it by like looking around and like throwing a chair out the window, like
people know
solving
me well
problems.
enough. If I need to leave a situation or if I need to do something, I'm pretty confident to just get up and walk out, right? Like I'll deal with the consequences later. So I probably did something to that effect. And my mom was a beautiful woman. She was always just like, Hito, I got you. Don't worry about it. But then, so this idea though of the struggle, right? I really think that there's, and I don't know, again, maybe mine works a little bit differently, but I love that struggle. Yeah. Right. And I don't think that I want people to have that struggle because of the self-esteem that you're talking about.
Yeah.
My son has a really good self-esteem, but he still does say that thing like, oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm so stupid. And and it's like your heart just like, yeah. And so I'm always trying to talk him into this idea of like, come on, son, that's not it. And let's work on something or whatever else. I do want that struggle there. And I don't think that you can get away from it. It's the self-esteem piece that's so dangerous to play with, right? Because if you don't have that, you might make bad decisions, right? Yeah. Judgment starts to go.
Or not follow your dreams, not like do that thing,
right?
And
then what a loss.
Yeah, what a loss for all of us.
So like the playwright in me, every topic that we tackle, I like to ask our guests, and I like to ask these guys, like, if you were to try to explain to somebody who had no idea what dyslexia was like, but you had to do it like through a metaphor, like what does dyslexia feel like? What is it like to have it or go through life with it? What do you think is a metaphor for this experience?
Can I share one that is not my own?
Yeah,
that I've heard that I
absolutely.
was like, yes. And it was the idea of a swimmer. And so you're a swimmer, you're on a swim team, you know how to swim, you're good at it, you feel comfortable with it, and then you're at the starting line and everybody gets up and they're going to swim their lane, you jump in, you're swimming in honey.
Oh, that's good.
Everybody else is swimming in water. And it's just, and then you start to second guess yourself. And then you start to be like, oh my gosh. And then that imposter syndrome sets in, you know, but like you're doing it, you can do it. I think that's another misconception that I wanted to make sure that we talked about in the myths of dyslexia. Like I, just a few years ago, was sitting with a psychologist and I had told her I had dyslexia and then I was talking about a book I was reading. She was like, oh, you know how to read?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like this still exists. Like, yes, not only can I read, I love to read.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that is another misconception that I want to clear up. But yeah, that would be my metaphor.
Swimming in honey.
I think for me, it goes back to that student I was talking about who just graduated with her master's. It's the experience from the external world that you're not going to be able to do this. I mean, it mirrors that piece of like, you can read, right? It's like that counselor in the third grade who the comedian Phil Hanley, who was our keynote this year, has a really great bit about that where he's like, this teacher was teaching before dyslexia was invented, right? So there's not an awareness of it, right?
Yeah.
There's not an awareness of it. And that teacher, counselor, whoever, imparting to that student who just graduated with their master's degree, like, you're not going to be able to be successful, right? Like, you're not going to make it. You'll be lucky if you graduate from high school, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, but it's obviously more poignant because she just did that.
Right.
Right. And watching her get hooded, like walking across the stage, and we were just like, good for you.
I win.
Yes. Yeah. It's dope.
I would say, so I had a nickname growing up, and I haven't said it because I didn't want to become Malibu Keith.
Shout out Malibu Keith on the ones and twos.
It was Tortuga, or Spanish for turtle. And I got it because athletically I could do everything, right? Jump, run, throw a ball, all those kinds of things. And I was athletically inclined, thank God. But I was slow at everything else. And for me, it was like the shell, right? And I don't know if I'm introverted because I want to be introverted or introverted because I had to hide a lot, right? And so, and I still love hiding, right? I can't begin to tell you how excited I am. I'll go home, throw open the door, and there's nobody to offend. There's nobody to let down. There's nobody to, whatever else. And Tiffany knows that, like, whenever I do writing of any kind, like, it's going to go to her before it goes out to the rest of the world. It's going to go to Nathaniel before it goes out to the rest of the world. And so there's this shell, right, that I have to live in, and I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. I love my shell. And there's very few times, and those that know me will know this, I don't rush anything, right? And for me, it's because you might be getting up and taking off, and I'm like, nope, I'm going to check my environment and make sure everything's cool, and I will leave when I am good and goddamn ready. And then we just mosey along. And I go back to the, it's the turtle and the hare race, and I'm the motherfucker who's going to win, I'll tell you that. So
Tortuga.
I believe it.
All right, Angela, take us home. So it's always fun when we bring a guest on, particularly who's got an area of expertise like you. Like, you help people. That's what you do. You're a person who helps people.
I think so.
Listen.
Shout out to Andrew.
Shout out.
Let's just own that. Like, yes, indeed, on both sides.
Take the imposter syndrome and just
put him
like,
over there.
okay,
Right.
okay.
And, okay.
So can you think of, either specifically or generally, whatever you're comfortable with, a success story that makes you smile?
Oh my gosh, I have so many students. I mean, if I could just create that one student where, you get them in third grade and their self-esteem is shot and they don't feel like they're going to be able to read. And then, giving somebody the gift of reading, I can't tell you. Like I had somebody that reached out to me as an adult and asked me to do some tutoring. And I was super excited because I was like, oh my gosh, to get this gift. And then I think that was too vulnerable. They were too nervous and they couldn't do it. But just all of those times that the kids walk across that graduation stage and they're going on to that next step. Yeah. And it gives me goosebumps, because absolutely you can do it. Absolutely. Whatever you put your mind to. And, these are kids who didn't think they could when they were 9 years old. And that's sad. Mm-hmm. So, there are so many. And then the other part of it that I love to share with kids is how many famous people, how many teachers you have in your building who have dyslexia that you look up to, or the, Harry Potters of the world. There's so many people that have dyslexia. So,
Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. So good to see you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's good.
No, this is like a great excuse to see it. Exactly. So we're going to dip out for just a second. And when we come back, we're going to close out the episode. Okay. This is Harder Than Healing.
Plus by APN is an official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. Plus by APN treats the root causes of mental health issues with neurotechnology like deep TMS, ketamine-assisted therapy, and stellate ganglion blocks, so you can get relief from symptoms and find long-term healing. Schedule a free consultation and find your treatment match at plusapn.com. That's PLUSAPN.com.
All
right. We're back. Episode 3, Whiskey, Tangro, Oxfot. Just in case there's anybody out there who doesn't see what we're doing there, what are we doing there?
Tangro.
Oxfot.
It's pretty entertaining.
I sprained my Oxfot in high school. It's the worst. It was on the shelf 3 weeks.
Right? I really love dancing. The Tangro's great.
Well, I mean, and so for me, it's a very common military whiskey tango foxtrot is, what the fuck. But when you put it into the what is it considered, alpha numeric whatever, when you're saying what a letter is when you can't hear it well, that's what you're saying, whiskey tango foxtrot. So when you put it like that, it makes perfectly good sense to somebody who's learning disorder and be like, oh yeah, that shit works for me.
What it's funny about when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking about words, obviously.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of weather, and weather.
Yeah.
Or there, and there.
Yep.
Like, which one am I supposed to use? Did I use the right one? I didn't even know there was another one that I was supposed to use. And then you have to find out, like, principle and principle. Why not just use the same word for the same word?
Right.
I love it, too, because if I'm typing, I will blast right past words like that and just keep on typing, and then I go back and read it, and I'm like, ooh, I just definitely used the wrong words. So there's definitely a part of my brain that just says, we're just going to blanket that word.
I'll do, I'll be typing something out, and I'll start spelling whatever the word is, and the little red line will pop up, and then I'll erase it and do it again, then I'll erase it, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to use a different word.
So I went... That's it. Oh man, the number of times I, as a teacher, I'm not diagnosed dyslexic. My sister definitely is. My father, upon reflecting, definitely was. And I would have experiences up at the dry erase board, right, where I'm teaching 6th grade English. And because when I started, I was teaching a unit of 6th grade English and teaching theater. And I would definitely get to words, and I'd just be like, well, I guess we're not using that word today. But I think about, again, what a loss. That was the thing that Angela said that struck me most, was what a inefficient way to assess human usefulness. when we have so much stuff we got to tackle. It's
Right.
2023. There's a lot that needs to be tackling. Side note, I want to just say our producer, Tiffany, when Angela gave her metaphor of having dyslexia is like swimming in honey, Tiffany, you pulled a face that was crazy. What was...
I didn't see it.
What was
I
happening?
mean, I had a visual, of course, of myself trying to swim in honey. And then it just kind of like, oh, that explains a lot of things for me. Not just in like the learning arena, but even in like the trauma arena.
Yeah.
And the weight of it, the heavy of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And how much extra work you have to put in to do one small thing that someone else, they don't even think about it.
So that's it for me, right? Because we had just recently, at our clinic, we do a trauma challenge. And in this trauma challenge, I have to get onto a whiteboard and write a significant amount of stuff. And for the first 4 weeks, this is what we do. And recently, I was like, I'm not writing this anymore and risking misspelling these things and getting corrected over and over again. So we made a booklet, right? And because we made the booklet, now I can just be like, here's your booklet. Let's talk about it.
That's pretty clever.
And yeah, so the workaround continues to happen, right? And so one of the things that Tiffany knows very well is that every time I come with a project, I have the strategy, I have the planning, I have all that stuff down, but 9 times out of 10, I'm going to hand a lot of that stuff to her because those are things that I don't do well, right? And then she can help out with that piece.
Well, I think it's challenging too, because oftentimes especially when we know that this is something that we struggle with, you still have to do it, you know? And I think that one of the things that I still struggle with is the thing that I have to do, right? Whether that's billing or, you know, notes or whatever it is, like it's still something that I struggle with. And I think that knowing that it's hard, like she was saying, the struggle doesn't go away. Like it's still there.
Yeah.
And
I wonder
tricky.
then, like what role grace has to play in that, like giving yourself a measure of grace and giving your, like, having humility, or like, I don't know, what do you need then to get past that?
It, for me, goes back to what we were talking in an earlier episode about that language and that dialogue with yourself.
Love yourself, yeah.
If you, and again, this goes back to this strategy that I have when I talk to my veterans about processing trauma. There's a space between you experiencing something, so this emotion, and then a thought. And if you are able to get to that thought without registering with yourself, that thought might be what we would consider a cognitive distortion. And I don't want to get clinical here, but this is how your brain tricks you and lies to you, right? And if you can get away from the trickster and say like, nope, I'm not going to let you own me today. Today, I'm going to love me. And if I'm going to love me, that is going to sound like I can do this, right? I can work harder. I can work whatever I need to do more, right?
Different.
Work around,
Different, for
whatever it might be. I can't do this conventional thing, but I can do anything else. And so if I don't let myself fall into that, I'm stupid, or I can't do this and run from it, and instead just dive into it, but the problem solving becomes, the bigger piece of the pie at that point.
I think the grace piece also speaks to the agency part and being comfortable with, and Angela was talking about this too, like being comfortable with going up to the whiteboard. And for me, what it is when I get up to the whiteboard and I don't know how to spell something, I'll just turn around and ask.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you spell weather? I'm like, which one is it? People are like, what do you mean? I'm like, which one is it? And they're like,
You know what I mean.
It's the T. I don't even know. WHETA. It's the longer one.
Yeah.
It's not the sun one. It's the other one. People help me with that, and the grace comes from, in some ways, knowing it and not being critical. Of that.
Well, and also not feeling like, that's not an indication that you don't know your shit.
Right.
Like, and that for me is a hang up that sort of is on other people too. like to a certain extent, we culturally
Oh yeah.
have to have the capacity to recognize that, markers of intelligence are everywhere.
Right.
And the things that we take as markers for being stupid or not useful are often just bullshit.
The testing piece, I think that speaks to that.
Okay.
And I think oftentimes when people, you'll appreciate this too, but people will come in with this testing report that they just got and have typically spent a pretty decent chunk of change on this thing. You get it back and it's psychobabble. And you all of a sudden have this categories of 4 different things, and it's like your intelligence is in the superior range. And people are like, well, why can't I do whatever? Yeah. The measure in that particular psychoeducational evaluation, the only utility of it is being able to look at it and go, oh, so you're really good at auditory communication.
Okay.
So let's skip the processing speed stuff and we'll just work with that. And let me tell you how to do that.
Yeah, so I was going to share with you guys when I talked to my son about some of these things, right? Because
Excuse me.
spelling is a little bit difficult for him. And we go along this line of like, okay, so spell this word for your spelling test. We going down the list. And at some point, if he struggles, he's like, rolling his eyes and he's like, I'm so stupid or whatever else. And so I try and communicate this piece to him like, look, he's an A-B student, right? And sometimes occasionally he gets that C and then he falls off the honor roll list. And he's got a couple friends and one of them's like straight A's, right?
Like easy straight A's.
Like
though.
easy straight A's.
Right.
And it's funny because my son is in that position of knowing that like, well, that means he's smarter than me, right? And it was...
And additionally better than me.
And so maybe that's his processing.
Right.
But when I communicate to him, I constantly tell him, is that going to be a measure of success?
Right.
And he was like, well, Dad, how can you know this? And I'm like, I'll cite my sources and say like, what we find is that most of success is really contingent upon temperament. And if you are persistent, self-motivated, and temperament, you will be successful. And I said, so you tell me, can you control your temper? Because it is more important for you to get A's, B's, and C's and then say to yourself, that's fine. I'm working hard. I love myself. I have good friends. I play sports. I am doing just fine. And oh, by the way, I'm not getting angry at people. I am, and I will tell you that if you ever meet this man, Nathaniel knows him quite well. Tiffany knows him quite well. This is a very gentle, adorable little human being.
He's pretty sweet.
And it's this piece of if he can just continue to hold on to temperament will be success, then he doesn't need to be the straight A student and think that that's better.
Right. And I think that the other part, and this is a shout out to I, like national mentoring program that works with college students, middle school students who have ADHD, dyslexia, learning issues. One of the pieces that we know is that the highest indicator of success for students is self-esteem in those grades, right? And so as we build this community of veterans connecting with civilians and civilians connecting to the theater and the theater troupe connecting with whatever it is, there's the community piece that fosters that self-esteem. And I think part of what's like what you're saying around like I would rather have you be a good human than get straight A's. And that's how I feel about it too. That's how I am with Devon. Like that piece for me is like I mean obviously I'm biased because he's my kid, but like he's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
And like when he does some random nonsensical thing, I'm like, bud, don't do that. But you're still a sweetheart. So okay, fine.
And my kids, they're sweet too. My kids are great.
Yeah,
they are.
They are.
I don't know. God, I feel like I fell down a sarcastic hole. I don't know how to get out. Zeb Hesman, I love you. You're wonderful.
It's all right. It happens.
Well, one of the things that I want to go back to, and it was something that Keith brought up, and maybe he can attest to this a little bit more, but we were talking about this in the turtle piece, right?
Yeah.
And saying that,
Oh, yeah.
What we don't want to communicate is that the turtle, by going slower, is going to win. We don't want to communicate, hey, go slow and it's okay, right? And I don't think, so what I...
Or that victory isn't a given. Like, going slow doesn't always equal winning. That's not, it's not fair to promise that to a kid, because that tail sounds like a promise.
Yeah, and so what our conversation at the end of the last piece was that's not where. Okay, so I was in Ranger School and I got recycled in Ranger School, and I still remember this guy telling me, while I'm super groggy, haven't slept.
Oh wait, hold on a second. Wait, recycled. Yeah, what does that mean?
Sorry, recycled
You look
in
confused.
Ranger School. So recycled is you didn't pass that phase. Okay. And that can mean a lot of different things. For me, it just literally meant that the person who was watching me go through didn't think I met certain check the box on.
What was it specifically? Like, what were you doing?
Yeah, and I don't know what I didn't do.
Okay.
But what I was doing was considered a patrol leader position. Okay,
Gotcha.
so it was a position of leadership, and during this piece, this person who was grading me said that I didn't do that. Right. I wholeheartedly disagree with him, but however, but this goes back to the turtle piece, right? I go in there and this, officer is telling me like, all right, Ranger, you got to sign this paperwork and then you can move over to recycle status and come back. And I remember thinking like, nope, not signing that shit. I didn't fail. I did everything I needed to do. And he was like, all right, well, that's great. But if you sign this paperwork, then you can go forward. And like he has this like kind of rattle off. And if you sign this paperwork, you can go forward and whatever else because you failed. And it was this failure piece that I was like, I can't accept what you're saying. And not that I'm like, some sort of weirdo or whatever, but at that point, I could not accept those words. And I don't, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't remember exactly how it played out after that, other than I'm sure that I signed the paperwork because I stayed there and then continued to go on and eventually graduated Ranger School. And I'll give you a day. 62 days is what Ranger School is supposed to be. I was in that school for 147 days. I didn't get 2 or 3 tabs. I just got 1, but I was in that school for 147 days. So when I said the turtle race, what I was trying to convey is that I'm not going to stop.
It's interesting too because as you tell that story, I remember that space.
Yeah.
And I remember having that conversation with you, and you were like, "I got recycled again," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess you got another 62 days to go."
Yeah. Well, it's this piece of going back to it. I'm not trying to convey this idea of you can be slow.
It's persistent.
It is persistent. It's self-motivated, and my level of success is simply going to be, in my mind, did I gain something out of this piece? And I don't know what that is, right? That's going to take some insight and introspection.
Yeah.
But so long as I can do that, I can stay. And you know what? And so maybe the analogy is a little bit misleading because it's not the turtle as much as it is I'm in my own shell, right? I'm in my own space. And I'm just not going to let you change me. I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to be open-minded. But my methods for how I do things have been successful. So I'm going to stick to those methods and be super open-minded. But
I mean,
those
obviously
methods-
you successfully changed something because you failed the first time and passed the second time. So obviously you gleaned something.
Yeah, well, and I think it's that piece, right? Is
Yeah.
like if you glean something, I had to slow down and pay attention. And so there's a piece of the slow down and pay attention that I think goes back to the turtle thing. So yeah, run as fast as you can. And that might be a different pace for some.
I feel like that's how we close it, man.
I like that. That's good.
I feel like that's how we close. So it's been another great hour sitting here chopping it up with you guys.
Yeah, it's been pretty entertaining. Angela was great.
Oh my gosh, genius.
Like, just have to say, shout out to
So
Angela.
shout out Angela.
Right?
Good
All right.
energy.
Well, listen, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We're going to be back real soon with another episode of Harder Than Healing. and sending you guys love. And as we always say, right, you guys are worth the healing. So that's what's up. Take care.
Hi, my name is Watika Ling, and I am the CEO of Warrior Now. And I want to thank you for listening to Harder Than Healing, produced in partnership with All Points North and Warrior Now. This podcast is recorded on the APN campus in Edwards, Colorado. Warrior Now is a nonprofit organization that provides veterans a whole health approach through peer-to-peer services. For more information, you can contact us at info@warriornow.org or pod@harderthanhealing.com. You can also find us on all social media platforms at Warrior Now. Like, share, or subscribe for new episodes. Thank you.